Okay, everyone, thanks for joining us tonight, and thanks to Jan for this what will be an interview or a Q&A. We are Barnthorne Publishing, and we go live and interview our authors, which are primarily military, but we do have other genres. And this will be posted on our YouTube, on our website, and on our social media. So I will conduct the interview. I will ask questions, and then listeners can jump on at the end and do the same with anything they want to ask. So the book that we are going to discuss is Laurence Scott GM, which we will get into those post-nominals. Very interesting story, and it's Arnhem Pathfinder. Okay, so Jan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so first question is, well, it's probably two in one. Is when did the idea of this book come about, and also why? Why did it come about?
So I've always wanted to write something about Dad, and when he was alive in later years, he used to talk a lot about the war and a lot about Arnhem, particularly Arnhem, surviving Arnhem, and he never actually sat and did a proper recording or a continual interview. So over the years I had to write down notes when he said things, and then eventually I did manage to talk about his actual escape from Arnhem when he had to get over the river, and then I just thought it's time, you know. He's passed away in 2010. The battle is being written about constantly, year after year after year. And I just thought, you know, it's time to get his story out, because he was a Pathfinder and they were the first into Arnhem. They actually landed and set out the landing zones and the drop zones for the armada that was following. And that story has been told in a few books, but it hasn't been told really with one person who was actually there at the time. And he's had, I mean, he wasn't, I say it because he's my father, he wasn't a normal human being. He wasn't at all. He was incredibly fit. He was insanely brave. And he had this amazing life of constant daring do. I mean, it's a ripping yarn, to be honest. And I thought, you know, he deserves it. And it's coming up to the 80th anniversary of Arnhem now. And I thought, let's do it. And you kindly published it. But I do want to just read out a quote that we've got in the book, which is actually from Lieutenant General Andrew Harrison, who's the Colonel Commandant of the Parachute Regiment, who very kindly let me quote part of his speech that he made at Ginkle Heath, which was last September 2003. Okay. So the quote I've chosen is, so I guess the question is, was the Armada into Arnhem in September 1944 worth it? And why do we commemorate with such passion what history has cruelly consigned into the bracket of defeat? Well, if I tell you that to this day my soldiers still cry, remember Arnhem, when they charge into the contemporary peril of bullet or bomb, you might start to understand what it means. And I think that kind of sums up what it meant to my dad, because it wasn't considered a failure to the men because they'd hung on for 9 days. Maybe we'll get onto this later. Yeah, they'd hung on for 9 days. So there was this mixture of pride and also sadness at what had happened. So I hope that answers that question.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. Thank you. And a little bit about the book, so without giving too much away, a little taster of what we can expect.
So it is without doubt a ripping yarn of my father, who just seemed to enjoy being in front of loaded guns or something, you know, in one way or another. He just liked the idea. No, I don't think he liked the idea, but he just seemed to find himself in these incredible historical situations which have lasted and got an almost mythology throughout history, really. Like, he was at Arnhem, he then went on to the Metropolitan Police. So there's his story, the full story about how he got the George Medal. And then he went on to become a civil clerk, I suppose it is, in Hornsey when he retired from the police, being a police officer. And he found himself in the CID when they brought in one of the most notorious serial killers in British history. He just happened to be there at the time. It's incredible.
Yeah, brilliant. We'll get on to those maybe some individual little stories a little bit later. For now, do we know why he joined the unit, the Pathfinders, or so?
So he started off in what are called, I'm sure some people listening will know about this part of it, 8th battalions. And as far as I can see, they were volunteers. He said they were volunteers. So he was 20. They were very badly equipped. He said their rifles were basically broomsticks. Their mortars were just vim cartons stuck on the end of some sort of stick. And they would just march round and round Weymouth by the sounds of it. They didn't have proper uniforms. They had rifles from World War One. So he wasn't happy with being in what he would call, I am going to swear, so I apologise for the language, what he would call the poor bloody infantry, which is the PBI. So I'm apologising, but that is in the book. So having learnt about his dad's experience, who went into World War One and was captured as a POW, I think that and the fact he was incredibly fit, it just happened to coincide with Churchill deciding in 1942 that they did need a parachute regiment, some sort of organised unit that could drop in from the sky, obviously, behind enemy lines. And in cooperation with John Lander, they started up the 21st Independent Parachute Company. Now, I don't know why it's called 21st, so if anyone does know out there, that'd be great for them to actually say. But they were the Pathfinder unit. So they were recruited specially because of fitness, mental agility, being able to learn very quickly, having a very specific attitude where you can go forward in the front of danger instead of running away from it. And they were a very determined bunch. And they also recruited a lot of German and Austrian and Polish Jewish refugees into this unit, which I think was very important for their survival, who had obviously escaped from Nazi persecution, had come over here and then had been specifically recruited because they could understand German. And I think that was essential to the Pathfinders unit's survival, because they were first in to Arnhem. They survived the 8 or 9 days, and about 2/3 of them actually managed to get out. So I think it was because they could talk to the Germans and they could also understand what they were saying.
Yeah.
So
and like
it
you say, they were really fit, really fit as well.
Yeah, I mean, he was an athlete, and he had, there was like legs, and then there was kind of the rest of him, really.
Well, he'd won medals. I've read the book, obviously, so he won medals, or a medal before the war for his fitness.
Yeah, so he won literally in 1939. He won an athletics race as an adult, as a 19-year-old. I think he was, 19-year-old then.
So he's the fittest of the fit.
He was A1, I think it is, isn't it, Army?
A1,
yeah. So he was past A1 sort of military fit. And also, I might as well tell it now, it is in Arnhem, they had a lot of the gardens were fenced off, and a lot of the casualties, there's a very famous photograph of a dead soldier. A lot of the casualties were because they couldn't get over this garden fence and get away or move so quickly. But because Dad had these incredibly long legs, was very, very fit, he specifically mentioned that he could jump over these gardens and escape when he needed to, which, as you'll see in the book, he did need to when the tanks and the half tracks came around the corner. So yeah, so there was that fitness and the mental, definitely.
Literally saved his life. Literally saved his life. That being that fit. And what impact did Arnhem have on him? Or what, you know, in your view, what do how did it affect him?
He was quiet, as in talking about it with the family while he was with the police. But he also had reunions at that time from, I think it's about 1976, where they'd formed an old boys club, 21st Independent Parachute Company Club, which was, they had 2 reunions a year. And he would obviously talk about it with his comrades. But when he left the police, that's when he really started. He didn't just sit, he wouldn't sit and talk, he'd just come out with these sort of, you know, these sort of profound obviously something had triggered, and he'd all of a sudden be talking about what happened during the ceasefire. There's a very well-known ceasefire at a crossroads in Usterbeck. And, you know, he'd just maybe see something on television, and then he'd just be coming out with this story about how they all had to keep really quiet because they didn't want to give their positions away, because he was in houses in Usterbeck at the time. But he'd see the walking wounded and the stretchered and those on jeeps and ambulances, literally virtually going down the road, and he'd recognise people, and he just wanted to, you know, grab them and bring them back to safety, but he couldn't. And this story would just come out, and then he continued that story. There are different accounts of this, so I'll just give the one that he gave me, where an ambulance stopped after the procession of wounded had gone. An ambulance stopped outside their road, so they would be upstairs in these houses watching where the Germans were, and instead of any wounded coming out would come 3 armed German soldiers. Now, rules of war. So apparently my dad leaned out the window and shouted boo at these soldiers. Then there's 2 separate accounts, which are, one is that the Royal Armoured Corps, something like that, opened fire on these guys. But another account is that the Pathfinders, including my dad, opened fire on these guys. Yep. So who knows, it may have been both. But they were machine gunned into a ditch, and then after a few minutes, this has been confirmed by all sides, they had a stick with a white handkerchief came up through the grass, and one of the guys hadn't been killed, and because they had German speakers, they said to this guy, you know, who are you, come out, surrender. And this guy did come they took him into the house, and he was a Viennese, I think he was an Austrian river police officer. What happened to him, I don't know. Whether they left him behind, whether he could have even been killed by his own side, because the Germans eventually, when the Pathfinders and a lot of the other regiments got to Usterbeck to get into the houses for shelter, the German army literally went. I've got some photographs actually, if you don't mind me. Yeah,
go for it. Yeah.
So if you can see, so this was Usterbeck, which is a town in Holland after the Germans had left, and if you can see, they've all been shelled. And the German army, they literally at the end were going house to house with flamethrowers and tanks and just driving the airborne soldiers out, and obviously killing them and completely destroying Usterbeck in the meantime. So this soldier could have even been killed, you know, in what we would call friendly fire. But these stories, he'd just be sitting in front of the television with his cup of tea, and then next minute this incredible story would come out. So that's how it, and it went in, and I'd sort of go and write notes.
Fascinating stuff, isn't it?
It's beyond. I think that's another reason why did I want to write this book, was because what was it about somebody who to me was a normal man, a dad, could be this person who could go through this battle, could be motivated to survive, could kill, because that's basically what he did, but have this amazingly kind, generous personality. It's almost like the double sides of the same coin. So fascinating.
And he obviously did survive, come out, fantastic career in the police as well. Should we give an overview maybe of that, and maybe a little bit about his a medal that he was awarded, a certain medal?
I'll disappear for a second, bear with.
Yeah.
So this is his actual original armband, which apparently he wore on his uniform when he first joined, which tells people he's on duty. So he still kept that. So he joined in 1946, which is virtually 2 months after he'd been demobbed from the 21st. So he was a police officer, and at that time I think it was 2 years training, but he didn't like beat work. So then he decided to take his detective exams in the early 50s, and he became a detective constable. And then I think it was 1963 he took his sergeant's exam and became a detective sergeant. Now he'd already got commendations for bravery. I think he'd arrested some thieves when he was on duty and off duty. So he'd come to notice that he was quite a brave person. But then in 1967, I'm not going to tell the whole story because it is quite a great story. He ended up being awarded the George Medal, and I have a replica George Medal because not everybody would have seen them. So if you can see, this is the front with the Queen, because it was the Queen who awarded it, and obviously on the back you got.
Hold it up a little bit, up.
George,
there we go. Yeah, we got it.
George and the Dragon. Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah.
And the Queen, obviously, because he was presented by the Queen. So, and I thought the irony is the ribbon's actually in the parachute regiment colours of blue and maroon.
Yeah.
So so he faced an armed convict and managed to overpower him and arrest him. It's quite a detailed story, so I won't go into all of that because the book does go through the whole sort of story. But he was very proud of that, and there's a picture of him and me with the worst haircut ever.
I mean, he was absolutely fearless in that. I mean, again, I won't give anything away or too much away, but he literally had a loaded or a gun pointed at him.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't back down. He refused to back down. No. More than once,
I think in his mind he thought, well, he'd got through Arnhem. He hadn't been shot there when he'd seen a lot of his mates being, obviously killed and injured. And I just think he just sort of used that sort of psychology of maybe in a way sort of intimidating the burglar the assailant to sort of back down, because he did, thank goodness. And they arrested him. So there is another good photo, which I really love, this one. So that's all the detectives as they used to be in their sharp suits.
Yeah.
And that's Dad, and that's the other two detectives, Davis and East, who were involved in the arrest as well, and they got the British Empire Medal at the same time. So great story. Brilliant. Great clothes.
yeah, very dapper. We'll save another story about the George Medal till a little bit later, so we'll carry on then. So after the police,
Yeah, so after the police, he joined as a civilian. I've actually got another photo of him, sorry, with the commissioner. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
He did join, he'd actually started his police career at Hornsey Police Station, and he finished his police career at Hornsey Police Station because he became a CID clerk. Now I did that work when I was in the Met Police, and it involves getting evidence ready for Crown Court. So you'd get everything, say it was a murder, you'd get all the evidence to do with the murder, and then it would get sent off to the Crown Prosecution Service or the police prosecutors, as I think it was in those days. Again, there's probably someone that can correct me, but so that's what he did. So he was doing office work, but he was working intrinsically with the CID, and they used to ring him up a lot. So he was also helping, obviously he got so much experience. He was helping the officers in the case with their cases as well as being a civilian. So yeah, he did get a visit from Commissioner McNee, which is in the book. And Dad used to collect for a children's charity, and McNee, he wanted to know why Dad was wearing a parachute regiment tie. So Dad said, well, I'm not going to show you unless you put money in the box. And the commissioner didn't have any money on him. So in the end, his helper had to cough up out of his pocket. But I've got a photo there of the actual McNee exam, finally getting to examine my dad's tie.
Brilliant.
So
Brilliant.
yeah, it was, you know, it's shock horror when commissioners come round, everybody's very nervous, and it was quite sort of scary for them to have him stand up and say, well, you know, you're not going to see it unless you cough up, basically. And he did.
So your father went back to Arnhem.
Yes. Yeah.
Anniversary, should we maybe touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so he I think he went back earlier than I realised that he went back. So very quickly after the war, I think it was about 1946, the Dutch started putting up monuments and also organising the Arnhem Musterbek War Graves Cemetery. And a lot of the veterans, I mean, it was packed then, used to go back and used to call it a pilgrimage. And I've got medals from him which do suggest that he went back a lot earlier than I thought he was. So, but I was aware he was going back probably from, I think about the age of 10. I think we went as a family rather than him going on his own. Yeah. So we went back a couple of times with him. I'll be honest, you know, I wasn't aware of the enormity of what had happened at that age. We do as you get older. And then the last time we went as a family was in 2004, and that was just a really fantastic time. That was perfect sort of weekend for them. And that was going to be the last time that we went back and that he went back as well. So. Yeah.
And there's some lovely photos in the book of his time there as well. Yeah.
There's also in 2004, because it's also a love story with Laurie and Peggy, my mum. There's a love story going through it, and they had my mum put up with a lot of things with my dad, in the sense that, you know, it was a dangerous job then. It's a dangerous job now being in the police. It's a dangerous job then. Although she was really proud that he got the George Medal, you know, when he went out of the door, she wasn't sure if he was going to come back or not after that. And she did sort of get very, very anxious. And in 2004, he went off with his mates to go and see someone, and she got a bit upset. So we all kind of, you know, got round her and sort of said, he'll be all right, he'll be coming back. And I don't know how, but he managed to get a red rose and give that to her. So there he is with the red rose as evidence. He did actually somehow find a red rose, and he brought that back to her, and then they talked again. And it was fine after that. It was fine after that. But it, you know, sort of, you know, she sort of started crying, and it was quite a shock for me to sort of see that, and then sort of realise, you know, her husband may not come back one afternoon. So but he did. Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay. We should go back a little bit now, or not back, but so is the George Medal and the medal, the group as a whole. So your father passed away in what year?
So 2010, he was 90. He did well.
Yeah.
He did well.
And you're left with his belongings, and you
Yeah.
thought instead of keeping them in a drawer or in your house, you will do some good with them.
Yeah.
Should we tell a little bit of the story?
Well, I mean, he had, I mean, there was these medals which my cousins kind of kept in their safe, but then I thought, you know what, I can't keep them. They're not actually mine. They kind of belong to the nation, if that's one way of putting it. So I think it was 2013, was it 2011? I can't remember now, but I decided to auction them, and it was a very hard decision. So I packed them all up, took them with some papers down to the auction house. They gave me a check there and then for them. And then I banked it because it wasn't my money. It was to do something good with it. And the 21st Independent Company Club had a very, very strong relationship with the Airborne Assault Museum, which is now in Duxford. It was at Aldershot, but now it's in Duxford. It's a brilliant, fantastic museum. And so I did contact John Baker, who was the curator, and he still is, and said, look, I've got this money. Can you use it for anything? And they were, at that time, organising a new exhibition entrance, which was part of a Dakota fuselage and a film of a paratrooper in uniforms through the ages jumping out. And I donated it to them, and it was brilliant. And they very, very, very kindly put up a brass plaque saying that it was donated in memory of my dad. And that's still there. So if anybody goes, it's in the entrance and it's still there. It was a really lovely thing to do. Yeah. And then I had his parachute wings. I've got replica parachute wings just to show people what they were like in 1944. They're tiny, but they're so symbolic. These are not his, but his were like this. And again, I had those. They're valuable. What can I do with them? So I contacted the Pathfinder via a lot of people, the Pathfinder unit who are in Colchester, and decided to frame them up with the history of their unit. And they are still there on their wall, and they're inspiring all the soldiers since. They're very, as you know, Lieutenant General Harrison said, it's still really, really important battle for paratroopers now to inspire them. And they still, I remember when in 2004, there'd just be groups of young soldiers just round the veterans, around my dad, just listening to their stories in awe, really, because they have their own, you know, battles to fight. Different technology, but maybe the same mentality. So yeah, amazing.
Well, you took your dad to the museum at one point as well, and he really enjoyed it, and he met John.
Yeah, it was when after Mum had passed away, and he didn't know what to do with himself, and I was thinking, I've got to keep him going. So I arranged with John Baker again to go to the museum and meet him, and he was a bit sort of confused as to where we were going, and I'd sort of bundled him in the car. And then he just loved every minute of it. And he always talked about going to Duxford ever since, till the last minute, really. I think that was in 2009, I think we went there. That was one of the last trips out. But there's a lovely photo in the book of him and John together. So he's got his medicine, and he's got his blazer. So it's a love, you know, it was lovely. And John was amazing with him. Yeah, they clicked very quickly. And because he was clattering around with all his medals, there was a lot of school kids and there, and they all sort of, you know, clustered round him as he sort of showed them his medals and stuff. It was a great day, really great day. Yeah,
brilliant. That's all the questions I've got. Now, is there anything, guys? If you've got any questions, start to either send them in, or you can unmute yourself in a minute, and we can hit Jan with some questions. I'm sure she'll be thrilled. Jan, is there anything else you want to speak of or cover that we haven't actually got out there that might be interesting?
2 more photographs, if that's
Yeah.
all right. So this one, you can see that, is the whole of the Pathfinder unit lined up at Horton Road Camp in Newark, and that is just before they went to the airfield and boarded the Stirlings for Arnhem. So they're all in their battle dress. So if they're in their platoons, which I think they are, 2 platoon, which is what Dad was in, he'll be in this group here somewhere.
Yeah.
So that is like a very rare photo, because there wasn't that many photographs taken. And then this is his last reunion at Newark, which was where they met. The 21st Independent Parachute Company Club met twice a year. And there he is. That's his last reunion, bless him, in 2009.
Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff. Very good.
Right.
Okay. If there is any questions, if anybody's got any of them, now's the chance.
I was just going to add from the wings. Obviously, the medals sold at auction, but that wasn't the end of the story, was it? They they appeared again, Jan. Is it worth saying a bit about where they are now and how they got there?
Yeah. So it was during COVID, and everybody was, sort of online and bored, and very strange time. And one of my friends, Linda Bailey, pinged that the medals were having, the police were having a crowdfunding to buy the medals back, because they'd been offered back up for auction. So the person that had bought them from me had actually passed away, and the medals had come up through the same auction house. So there was this amazing crowdfunder, and they managed to get enough together to secure the medals. And now they are in the police museum at Sidcup, and they're getting them ready to be viewed by the public and researchers. So all his papers are there too, and the George medal and his full collection of medals are there too. So if you want to see them, you can ring them up and see them. I don't think they're on display at the moment, but they're looking after them, which is just brilliant, really, really brilliant. And thanks to everybody that chipped in to buy them as well. It was an incredible story. Yeah, and they got on the evening news with that photo of me and him together with medals, police medals saved for the nation, which is a lovely, really sort of lovely end to it all. They kind of came home where they should be. Yeah.
Brilliant. Perfect. Jan, we have got a question coming, so let me just read this out. This is from Philip. Quick question. What tips can you give for how to address the first chapter of the book? Is it a scene setter or straight into details about the subject? And Philip is writing a book at the minute, so hence the question, I think.
So I've started off with a bit about his background, my dad's background, because I was trying to think, what influences on him were there that made him able to survive Arnhem. So I've set the scene with his family background, being from a refugee background, and then going through World War I, and his parents were quite poor. They survived the Blitz as well. They were in London when the Blitz was going on. So not only did his grandfather go through World War I, but then they had the Blitz, and they had their sons going off to war. So I kind of set the scene before actually going to the story of Laurence, because I think from the book's point of view, I'm trying to find out what actually was in his makeup to make him that strong that he could survive that battle. So I think it's a nice idea to give a good background first. That's how I structured this one.
Good.
So when his book comes out.
Thinking along the same lines, at least.
Yeah. No,
I just find writing chapters is easy, but writing the first one is the hardest, I think.
Is it? Yeah, I think I just think it's nice to put a human gloss on it all, because if you're dealing with a lot of facts, which writing biography you are, but it's still important really to bring the story of the person in, you know, what they went through, because then it gives that human story side, human interest. So maybe try that way.
That's cool. Thank you.
Right. Look forward to the book.
I think, yeah, I think we're good. So if anybody's got anything else,
yeah, can I just ask Jan? I mean, this sounds
absolutely.
like an absolutely fascinating book, and Neil, I'm sure, or Ashley will say how we can get hold of it from Barnthorne. But you obviously recorded down these stories, which is a fabulous thing to do. Did you go to other family members for stories as well? Where are your other sources?
So the other sources are from listening to because I was at the reunions a lot, and I'd sort of like hear what people were saying, and it does go in. You do remember. There's also a very good book called Leading the Way to Arnhem, which is a thorough history of the actual unit. And then Dad wrote a lot of stories in his club magazine, which is very fortunate. Wow. So I managed to get hold of quite a lot of those. And also he'd just written stuff down which wasn't published. I don't think the Italian stories are published. So I had those that I literally just copied them into the book, because the whole book idea is that it was in his words as much as possible. And he was quite a good writer. I mean, he was certainly very, how can we say, sarcastic sometimes in the way the British Army kind of organised itself, I suppose. But so yeah, so there was lots and lots and lots of bits and pieces. And then we had a historian called Fred Weatherly who collated everything and everybody's stories, and there was a lot from there that I still have copies of. So I sort of just pieced all that together. So it's in, as much as possible, it's in Laurie's own words.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome.
And Jan, there was also police people helping you out as well?
Yeah, a lot of my friends, a couple of them contacted some detectives that had worked with Dad in Wood Green, and they'd given me a couple of stories, and so I put in the ones that are printable. But there was another one which I will say. I think it was Wood Green Police Station, where apparently there was a bus stop which they could see from the station windows, and my lovely Dad would ring up the phone box by the bus stop saying he'd lost a parrot, and get the whole of the bus queue looking for this parrot in trees. I mean, I only hope he rang back and told them he'd found it and they weren't there missing their buses because they were looking for this parrot. So there was a lot of little, anecdotes. So I picked the ones out that I think were probably best for people who aren't in the police, to understand what was going on, because a lot of it's sort of reference to sort of police procedures. But yeah, I did have my fingerprints taken as well, so they're probably on at the criminal record office somewhere. Dad thought it was a good idea to take my fingerprints, but yeah, so the sources were from everywhere. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Right.
Okay, is there anybody else? If not, Jan, we're all good.
Thank you.
Okay. Ashley, I think we're good, mate.